Welcome to Conversations, where it's a pleasure to welcome to the program James or Jim Garrison. He's the chairman of an organization, an extremely important organization called World Forum, and are having a conference here in New York in conjunction with the Millenium Summit at the United Nations. And welcome very much to Conversations, and congratulations on a magnificent event here at the Hilton Hotel.
Thank you.
Wonder if you could share just briefly the World Forum, when it got started. I guess you're about 5 years you've been going. It's a very important venue for expression of the human spirit and so forth. But could you share a little of the history of that and leading up to the event of this millennial function that's sort of in collaboration with the United Nations?
Yes, we were founded in 1995 by Mikhail Gorbachev and a group of about 20 co-chairs from around the world, ranging from Ted Turner to Muhammad Yunus to Jane Goodall to Maurice Strong to Desmond Tutu, Elie Wiesel. And the purpose of the State of the World Forum was to convene a global network of leaders from all walks of life and from literally around the planet to gather together on a regular basis to look at what principles and values and actions should guide humanity as it moves beyond the strictures of the Cold War into the next phase of human development.
Extremely.
One of the things that we discovered in 1997 was that the Secretary General was going to convene during the Millennium Year a special Millennium Summit of Heads of State. We felt that it would be a unique opportunity for the Forum to also convene civil society and business leaders from around the world, so that while the heads of state were meeting, we could convene, as it turned out, upwards of 2,000 leaders from other sectors of society, so that with the heads of state that would join us from the United Nations, we could gather together to deal with what that issue, which in many people's minds is of utmost importance to the human community at the change of the millennium and the new century, namely the issue of globalization. How do we govern globalization? What do we think actually constitutes globalization? How do we make it more equitable? How do we make it more democratic? So that's why we're here.
Yeah, it's extremely timely to be able to bring in almost like a systems way many other disciplines and get at a comprehensive understanding of the human opportunities and challenges that confront us, because they are interconnected, and it's important to bring other people, other than just governmental, important as that is, to bring other academic and intellectual consideration together in a sort of systems way. I think you do that uniquely, don't you, in the World Forum concept?
Well, I think that probably the State of the World Forum convenes more diversity at more levels than maybe any other organization in the world. And if you think back 100 years, the principal players on the world stage were governments. But at the beginning of the 21st century, governments are certainly there, but so are the global corporations. Of the 100 largest economies in the world, 51 are corporations.
And growing.
And growing. And there's also the emerging role of civil society. So what the Forum is trying to do is honor the governments, honor the corporations, honor the emerging civil society, in the belief that if you can triangulate those three sectors in the broadest sense of those terms, then that is really what constitutes the most effective future of global governance.
Yes, we might be able to realize some real synergies. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that. I appreciate you. This is Jim Garrison. He's the director of the World Forum being convened here. Thank you very much for viewing, and there'll be more coming up from the Forum here at the Hilton Hotel early September the year 2000. Jim, once again, thank you very much and good luck. Welcome back to Conversations, where it's a pleasure to welcome to the program a friend of Conversations, that being Jeff Gates. He's been here, and he's he's with the Shared Capitalist Institute, I guess. That's is what it's called. He had written the incredibly seminal book in many people's minds called The Ownership Solution some time ago. He has a new book out, 98. He has a new book out, and he's also running on the Senate, for the Senate in Georgia. And there's a lot to talk about, and Jeff, welcome very much to Conversation. New book. What's it called?
It's called Democracy at Risk, Rescuing Main Street from Wall Street. And then it has emblazoned across the top of it a populist vision for the 21st century.
Very good. We really need that, right?
Well, that's the idea. And it turns out that Ralph Nader picked it up as kind of the manifesto for rebranding the U.S. Green Party. And that's partly why I agreed to run for the Senate and Georgia on the Green Party platform.
Mr. Coverdale's seat, right?
That's right. Paul Coverdale, from Republican, very nice man, died tragically a couple of months ago, And oddly enough, he of course ran the Peace Corps for Ronald Reagan. And what I propose in this new book is something called the Prosperity Corps. That if we're going to really get beyond genuine peace, we need to have genuine prosperity worldwide. So one of the themes in there is that economically sound, ecologically sound prosperity is within our reach. So we should go for that.
Yeah. It's a unique view in a certain sense from the standpoint of many in terms of economics that you do have, and it's coming off this idea that we have to build some ownership into the folks rather than just have it concentrated in the traditional ownership class. It's a sort of unique take on economics from what we had, whether it was Schumpeter or Keynes or whatever we have theoretically. It's a pretty unique view, don't you think? And yet there's many, many important people, like you say, Ralph Nader among others, a great number of others, who picked up on it and seen the wisdom of the need of something like what you're suggesting, right?
What I call it is common sense economics. What we have now is $17 trillion. That's 17,000 billion in the hands of money managers. And what they do, what has now happened is financial values have become a proxy for all values. And so if it doesn't show up on a financial radar screen, it's simply not taken into consideration. So the thought is you need to take ownership and peopleize it, localize it, human-size it, and that's the only way that capitalism becomes genuinely what I call community-wise. You reconnect it to people. And so that's the theme of the book.
And it's a large-scale thing, and I know I remember that issue of, or that issue, I guess, edition of Meet the Press where he did say that, and he said that this book has been, he's got a new book out, Ralph Nader. So you're running on the green ticket then in Georgia?
Well, the Georgia race, because of a death, was a special election, so you're not really identified on the ballot as having a party affiliation. But the Green Party approached me to run for Newt Gingrich's seat about 2 years ago, and I said no. They came back, and because of Ralph having based his campaign around this new book, I said, well, let's go give it a go.
Yeah, absolutely. Why not? And we should pick up more on that and let this book get out. Is there any particular way you could let people know? Is there some way that you could facilitate? It's in the stores now, but is there a website or anything like that to help them get in touch with the book?
Yeah, if you look at sharedcapitalism.org, that's a website. You can get it there, and then the internet sites have it. All right.
And of course it would be at Amazon and that sort of thing.
That's correct.
Well, we were talking, we're here at the World Forum Conference, and we know one another from over the years. We first met way back when he was working with Senator Long, way back, years and years ago. But one thing we did promise each other is that we will indeed do an in-depth interview with him about this book, and I look forward to that. But we wanted to do a little piece here to share the fact that he was participating in this World Forum. You were part of a panel today, right?
That's correct.
Yeah.
This is, I've been into 4 of these. I think we've had 6 of them. So.
Yeah, okay. Well, then you got that in. I think it's really good to get some realistic economic consideration into all of these patterns, because I tend to see the economics as really important and perhaps underrepresented here, although this is a pretty eclectic group of people, interesting group, the World Forum. You've come before to the World Forum?
Yeah, sure. I've been 3 or 4 times. It's been in San Francisco every year, but this year.
Yeah, it's a good idea to get a whole lot of different kinds of people together.
It's a great idea, and it's very broad range. I mean, we have indigenous leaders, we have economists, we have heads of state. So the idea is to really identify the metaphors and the metaphysics for the 21st century. That's the objective of it.
And get some synergies between all these specialized disciplines and so forth.
Yeah, and to take ideas and move them into action, not just to talk about it, but have genuine initiatives that people work on between the meetings, and that's what we're doing.
Actually get something done.
I imagine that.
Okay, your pleasure to have the Perceptions. Jeff Gates, then. Great pleasure, Jeff. It's really good to see you again. Look forward to doing that piece a little bit down the line about the new book, and congratulations on it, and hope you can pull it off in Georgia.
Thanks.
Your pleasure to have his Perceptions. Stay tuned. There'll be more coming up from the World Forum Convention here in early September, the year 2000, and happy to bring you that. Stay tuned. We'll be coming right back. Thank you.
Well, I think that as we move into this new century with its technological marvels and the speed of communication, and people are tending to really rush along certain pathways, and so it's very important to have a global perspective and to find out the picture beyond the part of the puzzle that you may be involved with.
Yeah, rather than specialization, perhaps a comprehensive systems understanding. Buckminster Fuller comes to mind. He had that kind of a view, or Margaret Mead did. I think they had a wide-ranging view. You were here addressing a children's panel and also environmental issues. I know you're very concerned with environmental issues. Population 6 billion now, things are growing, there's a press upon resource and so forth. What's your general outlook as far as the ecological outlook for the planet in a broad general sense? Are you optimistic or pessimistic, or is that too simple?
Well, in a broad outlook, the way that we are destroying the natural world, the way that we are using up the natural resources, the way that we are abusing this planet, which is the only home we have, is really terrifying. And if you take that along with human cruelty and greed, it presents a pretty grim picture. But I do have hope for 4 reasons. The amazing ingenuity of the human brain, now that we know the problems and we admit to them, the resilience of nature if we give her a chance and perhaps a helping hand, the tremendous enthusiasm of young people if they are empowered and if they know the problems, and finally the indomitable human spirit, the people who tackle things that are absolutely impossible but they somehow manage to do them.
There's sometimes a trade-off between economic development and environmental concerns. That's a thing we have to keep in mind. Do you think that there are some possibilities through ephemeral doing more with less, or sophisticated good design in terms of technology that can mean we don't have to rape the planet the way we did in the industrial process, and there may be some hope in technological good design of the technology that's coming along? Or
that's one of the important things, and there are all the time being new innovative ways of making engines go with much less pollution and so forth, and reducing emissions into the environment, reducing greenhouse gases, hopefully reducing chemicals. All these things can be done, but they've got to be done in combination with leveling off this explosive growth of the human population, and we've got to do something about the horrible, greedy overconsumption of the affluent societies around the world.
do you think there's something about the human nature that dictates that they shall be greedy, or is it a more malleable thing? If the conditions were such, they might be able to settle down into a more appropriate and ecological idea in terms of their relationship to the material world?
I think it's probably quite deeply innate in human nature, but that doesn't say that we have to continue behaving in this way, because we have culture, we have our brains, and we are capable of suddenly realizing that if we continue with this selfish way, which seems to be gratifying now, we realize that if we continue like this, it will spell the end of life as we know it on this planet. So if we care at all about our children and their children, then we must find ways to behave differently.
There are some, if I may, just one last thing. People from the Kofi Annan at the United Nations have made a point when they talk about the digital divide, or the divide in terms of he's made a point that 1/2 of the population of the world, 3 billion people, have never in all of their life made a single phone call, which is a pretty incredible thing when we're talking about the internet and some of these technological developments. There's a big divide between the haves and have-nots in the world. Some would say that the haves are living very well, and that the only way we can keep the sustainable economic pattern is to have the have-nots understand that they are not to become haves. Is that a problem? Or how do we deal with that in terms of the material world?
That's absolutely a no-no. I mean, this can't happen.
You understand what I'm saying?
I know what you're saying. We have to, I repeat, we have to reduce the growth rate of our human population. We in the affluent societies have to learn to use less. The imagination of people like Muhammad Yunus, the Grameen Bank, he's a living saint.
Yes,
he's
indeed.
done more for the poorest of the poor than any other person in this century, or maybe ever.
Yeah.
And he's shown that you can bring the poorest of the poor up and give them telephones so that this divide starts to become less significant. It's going to take a long time. It's going to take a lot of goodwill. And fortunately, there are more and more programs like this. And conservationists have begun to understand that to conserve the natural world, you can only do that if you involve the people living around the periphery, as we do to save the famous chimps I've been working on since 1960.
For which we all thank you for that
Yes.
work.
We're still carrying on with that. We're having our 40th anniversary celebrations this year.
Congratulations.
Yes.
This is wonderful. I wonder one last thing is we just had the genome. The genome is sequence, amazing accomplishment. And one thinks in terms of the maybe 10 trillion cells that make up the human organism or an organism, and it's a miracle in a certain sense. We now understand the DNA, that every cell, individual entities within that organism, are in communication with all the others and operating maximum. I wonder if that in any kind of way is a kind of metaphor for the way we want to see the human society operating, so that there's a more appropriate, non-exploitative utilization of the mass of American people in a way like each of the cells of an organism must function properly and be in communication with each other. Anything we could learn from that?
I think it's an interesting, I haven't thought about that before, but
Like
it is
the Gaia thing comes up sometimes.
yes,
you know.
yes. I think, we have to learn that we're living on a planet and there's a web of life.
Yes.
And this web of life, this biodiversity, is necessary for the planet's health. We don't yet know what will be the result of losing some of the life forms that we've already lost through our
losing them all too
exploitation.
rapidly.
Oh, we're losing them every day.
Yeah, right,
And,
yeah.
So yes, we have to learn to live in a better balance, harmony with nature. And we need to balance society, the gap between the rich and the poor, the haves, the have-nots. We have to balance the power between men and women. We have to improve the condition of children. We have to learn to live in peace.
Absolutely, yeah.
All these things.
Well, Bucky Fuller used to say that we may have been transcending scarcity as an ontological reality. I don't know if there's any hope in that. But in the computer's a wonderful example. They get smaller and smaller, and the technology gets smaller and less polluting. So maybe there's some hope in the good design and the ephemeralization, doing more with less, that we might be able to pull in, as well as connecting it with the other responsible elements of the government and the business sector. But you have been a light onto those who are concerned with things ecological, and we thank you enormously for all your work and
Thanks.
congratulate you very much on that. And I think it's wonderful for the World Forum that it's been able to have you involved since its initiation, and almost from its initiation. It's going to be going on now it will continue past the Summit Forum.
Yeah, we'll continue every year. There will be a State of the World Forum, and it will be a place for the private sector to meet with governments.
And you've been involved. Are there many other such forums that you're aware of, or that you've been made aware of, or is this a singularly important forum, or are there others, and should there be others?
There's a similar one in Europe, a similar kind of initiative to bring people together. I went to one of those, and it was pretty similar, the same kind of ideals. So, and I'm sure there are other smaller ones dotted around. I think they're all good, because you can't have everybody come to this. So we need more, so that more people can meet, and you can have cross-fertilization, and people inspire each other. Yes.
Well, we got this one, the year 2000, and the summit that Mr. Anand has called has really been a singular moment in the evolution of events. And I'd really thank you, Jane, very, very much for everything, for participating in the program, for all your work. Your pleasure. The Perceptions, Jane Goodall. We'll be coming back for more from the World Forum Conference here in New York City in early September of the year 2000. Stay tuned. We're coming right back. Once again, Jane, thank you for everything. Coming right back. Welcome back to Conversation. It's a pleasure to welcome to the program Queen Noor, who's just been participating here. And Queen Noor, welcome very much to New York City and to the forum.
Thank you very much.
It's an incredibly important event. The Millennium Summit and the World Forum Summit is perhaps as important as the Millennium Summit, in that a lot of issues that aren't raised in the UN itself are being raised at this conference, do you think?
Well, I would like to think that the same issues are being raised perhaps in both, but the juxtaposition of both means that there's an ever expanded dialogue taking place, not only with heads of state, but with international organizations, with citizen groups, civil society representatives, and corporations even, who have been present in some of these discussions. And I think there's been an emerging consensus that we all need to work together if we're going to tackle almost all of the problems that have been laid out as the most serious pressing global challenges that the world faces today, both at the UN and by civil society and meetings like this.
Yeah, they're all interrelated, and
They're
comprehensive
all interrelated.
pattern is what we increasingly need. The genome's just been invented, DNA. Every cell in the organism is in communication with another. We need that kind of thing.
Well, the emphasis is being placed on partnerships, and it's partnerships that are absolutely essential as we increasingly integrate the solutions to problems that are integrated in their causes as well. And so therefore, the Forum 2000, the Millennium Summit, and other meetings that are taking place in New York at this time, all have the possibility of contributing, of enhancing dialogue and contributing to coalition building among different groups across sectors as well as within sectors. And those coalitions have already proven very successful in addressing arms issues and health issues and poverty issues around the world. So hopefully we'll be accelerating the progress that we make.
And also, as you indicated, some of the corporate people are being able to be involved in this world.
Well, they're playing an increasingly important role, and it seems to me assuming an increasing social responsibility in many of their actions. For example, in terms of immunization programs and other health programs that corporations have joined with the United Nations and non-governmental organizations to make possible just in the last several years.
We're on the verge of eradicating polio.
Inshallah.
It's an absolute godsend. Well, I know you have a plane to catch, and I really thank you very much
Not at
for
all.
participating in the program.
Not at all.
In the conference.
Very nice. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Good luck. Welcome back, and we're really pleased to welcome to the program Deepak Chopra, and welcome very much to Conversations. We're at the World Forum, and it's a very interesting combination of the United Nations and then this event, which is an annual event. They're at a crucial time in the evolution of universal consciousness and so forth. I presume you agree with me that this is an important coming together of many,
Yes,
many important
it's very
forces.
important because there are scientists and there are politicians and there are peacemakers and there are people who are interested in spirituality. It's a coming together of minds from different perspectives, and that's what universal consciousness is, an infinity of perspectives.
And it's also that we've got people from many different sectors here. I mean, it's not just one specialized group or one specialized view. There's a lot of people in the private sector. There's people from technological companies. There's people in the private sectors coming here. And then also people who are concerned with environmental and spiritual questions. And they blend in this World Forum, perhaps maybe better than they do in other venues which tend to get specialized out in their own particular field of interest.
It's true. It's absolutely true, because here you have people discussing the impact of biotechnology on the ecosystem, the impact of the ecosystem on our identity, the evolution of consciousness, globalization, economic freedom, elimination of poverty, addressing issues like ethnocentrism and racism and bigotry and prejudice. So it's very, very, very comprehensive and holistic in the true sense of the word.
Yeah, it is. And I think the Hindus have told us for a long time it really isn't truly a seamless web. I mean, it is
It's
a seamless
the web of
existence.
life which connects everything with everything else.
And do you think that we're getting a comprehensive view here sufficiently away from reductionist specialization, and one wishes that we could have had perhaps a Buckminster Fuller or some
It would have been
Chardin or comprehensive thinkers? Do we have these kind of people in your experience that are on the order of Buckminster Fuller back in the 60s?
No, people like
70s,
Buckman.
How do you see that?
People like Buckminster Fuller, Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, they laid the groundwork, they opened the door. But, you know, they were visionaries and they were pioneers. And because of their work, you have great insights now and people who can actually take it the next step. So I think, you know, like anything else, everything is always and constantly and ever in evolution and transformation to higher degrees of complexity, abstraction, and ultimately simplicity and understanding.
Yes, I see. One last question, we could. The genome we have now is an incredible thing, and we now with the DNA, and we understand mitochondrial, that apparently we come a common ancestor out of Africa 200,000 years ago. We've been able to extend our consciousness and create these technological environments. Do you think we're at a time comprehensively in the evolution of universal consciousness of a qualitative transformation against that kind of a time scale? Closing quotes on what has been the human experience, coming to a new relationship to the broader evolution of perhaps a priori mysterious universal consciousness, or
yes,
not,
if we are careful, yes. In creativity directed outwards is science and technology. Creativity directed inward is the evolution of consciousness. If we focus only on our creativity directed outward, whether it's the genome project or nuclear technology, then we have tools for mass destruction. The genome project can be used for the elimination and extinction of all life on this planet.
or it could be used.
Or on the other hand, it can be the salvation of not only humanity but of the larger web of life. So technology is neutral. What we do with it is up to us, We have to integrate our inner evolution with our outer creativity.
And those things may be coming at a time. It's overworked. I was just talking to my friend, paradigm. I can remember when paradigm was hardly in the dictionary or hardly in the lexicography, and synergy, and some of these words are coming. But we live at a time of some sort of a real qualitative transformation, seems to me. And
Yes.
You've been contributing to understanding of that from a...
Well, you know, I'm kind of part of the wave. There's nothing that we actually do. We are expressions of the cosmos, and the cosmos uses us to understand itself. Even the genome and the desire to understand the genome is coded in the genome.
Yes, that's
right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's an interesting thing. We're coming to a culmination of understanding things. Even the DNA. I was talking to a friend of mine. We've got 6 billion human beings. The DNA, 10 trillion cells in your body, and each one is in communication with all the others.
Absolutely.
It's maybe a good model for the Gaia idea. We got 6 billion souls heading for 10, and that we have to have each of those cells operating maximally in order to get into a kind of music of the spheres that might interaccommodate us to the universe at another level, perhaps. You know?
Yeah. Don't forget, I mean, we live in a little planet which is a speck of dust in an infinite void, a little life-infested rock.
Yes.
Okay, so, you know, if you look at things from a bigger perspective, you'd see that we are, you know, like a few microorganisms on a bit of cheese thrown into a junkyard in the suburbs of a rinky-dink galaxy.
My Lord.
So, you know, let's not overrate our importance to do anything. We are instruments of God, and ultimately God takes care of everything.
Okay, one last thing. Buckminster Fuller, God rest his soul, died in 1983. He used to say, is there some purpose? He would ask at a very pragmatic level to human purpose or biological evolution. And he used to posit that the world, that there's a second law, moves toward, all systems, closed system, move to chaos, to the limits of the system. He posited that biological evolution was an anti-entropic, and apex, as he saw it by human consciousness, was an anti-entropic function in the universe, an important function in the universe. Do you think there's anything to be said for that in this universe where we have not as yet been able to clearly, in scientific instrumentation, discern life forms elsewhere coming back from
but
the
we've
broader
looked,
universe?
first of all...
Just to give it a little
yeah,
bit more
but first of all...
a rinky-dink,
well, first of all, we've looked at a very small part of the universe. It's like going to say, I went into my backyard and I didn't see anything. Okay, if this is a holographic universe, then what's here is everywhere. And what's not here is nowhere. I mean, if this is truly a holographic universe, then the odds of life permeating the whole cosmos are extremely high. That's number one. Okay.
Probability, but
okay.
We haven't got it.
Yeah, well, you haven't looked further than your garage.
Yeah, that's right.
You know, you haven't gotten out of your garage.
We haven't had the instrumentation to do it, right.
And so that's one. Secondly, as far as anti-entropic is concerned, yes, you know, everything goes through cycles of stability and then stagnation and then chaos and then dissolution and then incubation and then quantum leaps of creativity and the cycle. So there are cycles of entropy and then creativity and entropy and creativity. The universe functions in those cycles. And thirdly, we're very much still in the infancy of our scientific understanding. You know, in less than a few decades, you'll have the technology, even if you think there is no life in other parts of the galaxy, in a few years you'll be able to take the genome information, email it to a distant star or a distant planet, and then use the raw material and dust of that planet and through robotics seed the galaxies with life.
You have to have an email. You have to have a host receiver.
Well, you'll have a
server over there on that.
Yeah, you'll have previously.
We haven't got that yet.
You'll have previously sent a robot over there to be the receiver.
Oh, I see. We're
like,
going to send the robot.
Yeah.
Well, I'm all for that. I'd rather send the robots than the people, I think. Anyway.
Well, you send the robot, then you email the information to the robot, and then you let the robot assemble it from the dust of stars.
Well, that might be. Gerard K. O'Neill will take heed, right? Listen, I thank you really very much. It's your pleasure, Deepak Chopra. We're at the World Forum. We thank you for viewing. We'll be coming back with more. That's it for now, Deepak. Once again, thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Bye-bye.
Welcome to the program, back to the program. It's really a pleasure to meet an old friend of conversations and of the world, for that matter, John McConnell, and he's the founder of Earth Day, or the initiator of that, and he's here at the conference. And John, welcome very much to Conversation.
Thank you, Harold. It's a pleasure to be here, and this is a momentous day for me. I was telling you that yesterday I met with President Gorbachev from Russia.
Wonderful.
And we had been in contact with them. They are now picking up on my website and getting attention all over Russia for the Earth Trustee ideas.
Wonderful. Well, we should maybe remind the audience, we're at the World Forum Summit. It's in conjunction with the UN Summit that's being carried here in early September night of the year 2000. But I wonder, we could share. You were the one, you knew Margaret Mead, you knew Bucky Fuller, and you helped get the Earth Day started way back in 1970, if I'm not correct?
That's correct.
Yep.
And my whole life prepared me for this. My father was an evangelist, and people say I'm preaching. But anyway, I was in touch with top world scientists when I had a research laboratory. I used to talk with Dr. Teller about how we should stop our atomic bombs.
Do you think he heard you?
Yes. Well, and incidentally, I'll have too many asides here if I bring in all the stuff, but anyway. Okay. Well, I'll just mention, I think it was beautiful. If we look for the good where we have problems, it really moves us ahead. And he said that he'd written about the importance of education, that if we could educate the people of the world for peace.
You're talking now Mr. Gorbachev?
I'm talking about Teller,
Okay.
Dr. Teller.
Trouble is, you've met too many remarkable people in your life, John.
I know. But anyway, I thought that was great. And again, if we can have more money for education than for bullets, we're going to have a great future.
Well, let me go along with you. Now, you've put an Earth Proclamation that you've been putting together over the years and getting the signatures of some influential people. Maybe you could talk to that Earth Proclamation.
I wrote the Earth Day Proclamation in San Francisco at the request of the mayor. And the point was, this was back in 1969.
69, 70, right at that
yeah,
time.
but the
and
first
Earth Day got started in 1970. No?
1970, that's
Magic
correct.
year 1970.
And the point was that it was incredible how this caught on media, and I'll talk again too long if I tell everything,
No, yeah, I know.
but the idea to get across the idea of peace, justice, and the care of Earth. We want every individual and institution. Our problem is both the nature of people as they think today and our institutions.
Well, this proclamation, could you tell us about that? Because you've got a number of signatories to it,
Yes,
and
you've
got a picture of it.
I got a picture of it. I got the
here it-
proclamation.
There is the proclamation.
This is one of the most important documents in the world today.
Okay.
And the signatures that are on it here, it goes back, I'll just mention a few of
Does
them.
this go back, excuse me, does this go back to 1970?
1970. This was written June 21st, 1970.
God bless you.
That was right after the first Earth Day.
Yes.
We wanted to make Earth Day really global.
Yes.
And so anyway, among the people who thought this was a great idea, some of you names you'll recognize, Dave Brower, for example. Oh, Eugene McCarthy, he thought this was great. John Gardner, but the main thing was Uthant.
Yeah, you thought
We got
that.
global attention for this. It was
Surely.
sent out as a press release. We had participation all over the world. Buzz Aldrin, I met with him, the astronaut.
Wonderful.
And I could go on. Some of the more interesting names.
And the intent of the Earth Proclamation is...
Well,
a
it
call
says
for
right
peace
here, yes,
for-
peacefully end the scourge of war, provide an opportunity for the children of the disinherited poor to obtain their rightful inheritance in the earth, redirect the energies of industry and society from progress through products to progress through harmony with Earth's natural systems for the improvement and quality of life.
Amen. And that was a statement that went through in 1970. And you've had now, how many signatures that you had? It's a rather select group, really.
Right. Well, the signatures the number of signatures we had then were about 15, I believe.
Yes, and
but
now?
then we, through the years, people wanted to cite it, and I thought I'd make use of it.
Yeah.
And so along the way, Senator Hatfield, Isaac Asimov.
Oh, wonderful.
We had, the first wife of Lennon,
Oh, yeah? Okay.
Cynthia Lennon, and David Dinkins. When I met him, he added his name,
Okay.
and Oscar Arias.
Oh, yeah.
And,
He's here.
And yes, and then the final two names were Yasser Arafat
Yes, I've done interviews.
And Yehudi Menuhin.
Oh, wow. And did you
Now-
say that Mr. Gorbachev himself is thinking of signing this?
He signed it.
He signed it. That's
He
the last
signed
one.
it yesterday.
Oh, just
He's the last
yesterday.
one.
This
And
would
he
be
put a line under his
September
name.
5, yeah.
Here it is.
Mikhail Gorbachev.
That's his signature right there.
Well, congratulations. I think that's a capper, as they say, right?
Yeah,
to this.
that culminates 20 years of effort.
And we could. We're sorry we've got much more time, John. But you met with him for about a half an hour.
Right,
yesterday,
right.
You said, and had a one-on-one meeting
That's
with
right.
him.
He thought this was great,
Yeah.
and I feel if we can only wake up the media to get attention for what's important, why I think we can change attitudes and conduct and hope all over the world.
Okay, this is an incredible day, isn't it? This is an incredible
is.
week in New
Yes,
York. When
it
they're having
is.
the Millennium Summit and then this wonderful World Forum
Right.
event that goes on annually. And it couldn't have anyone better, I think, than John McConnell, who is the father, I think it's true to say, the father of the Earth Day concept.
Thank you.
And I congratulate you on the work and congratulate you on the statement, the sign, and I particularly congratulate you in the moment in having had Mr. Gorbachev, a man of tremendous influence in the world, sign on to your proclamation. Congratulations.
Thank
John.
you. Thank you.
I really thank you very much for participating here in conversation.
Thank you.
Your pleasure to have the
good to
procession
see you.
John McConnell, a really fine gentleman and the father, in a real sense, of Earth Day again. We're at the Millennium Summit, or the World Forum Summit, in conjunction with the Millennium Summit of the UN in early September of the year 2000. Okay.
Thank you.
We'll be coming back. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Welcome back. We're here talking now with Kevin Saunders at the World Forum Summit, which in a certain sense is conjunction with the, with the summit at the UN. An incredible event, an incredible group of people gathered here, no, Kevin?
Yes, indeed. I think also the interesting thing, the striking thing, is there is a kind of subtext emerging at this meeting and indeed at the United Nations too. And I cannot think of a single speech by a single person here on any subject at any meeting in which at some point the internet was not mentioned.
Yeah, well, it should be.
And I think it recognizes that in fact we are now living in the very early stages, the cave painting stages, as it were, of a revolution which is quite the biggest change to come along in human affairs since the capture of fire.
Yeah, it's quite.
And and ironically, it has rendered much of what is said here interesting but irrelevant. That is to say, they're still discussing the whole frame of reference in which the discussions are being held is necessarily within the context of nation states and organizations and governments and arrangements that were set up to work within the concept of nation states as they have existed for 1,000 years.
And the internet doesn't necessarily respect those at all.
The internet has ended all governments of flesh and steel and given way to a new community of mind in which people are united only by their shared taste in information.
You don't think those people that are interested in the information environment, internet and so forth, are well enough represented at this meeting here? We're at the World Forum meeting, or at the United Nations itself, the summit that's being held there, or not?
No, I think that all of the meetings here could benefit immensely from the presence of somebody like Stuart Brand.
Oh yes,
Right.
yeah, that would be good.
Right.
Yeah, it's amazing. We know each other for some time. You've been involved in maybe get you a real quick rundown. You were at CNN. You were at
I was
ABC, for a
ABC
while,
before that,
Australia.
and in Australia I was with the Nine Network.
Yeah, and you're watching all of this all this information technology developing.
Well, I've sort of grown up with it. I started in radio
Right.
before television existed in the town I was working in.
Right.
And then I was in Perth in Australia, and then I went to Sydney to see this wonderful new thing called television.
Yes.
And
yes.
became part of that, became involved in the news, and then went from there to the and then after visiting the United States, I realized that this really is the belly of the beast,
Yeah.
good or ill,
Yeah.
and that this is the center of the media, and New York is the center of the media.
This is where it is going to come from.
But this is in itself is also changing because the nature of the internet is such that it creates a world in which the center is everywhere and the circumference nowhere. It really redistributes power and renders all the former kind of centralized structures obsolete.
Who are some of the people that you know that you've come on in the last, let's say, couple of years or something, that are most accurately or most comprehensively getting a feel for the implications of this emerging new, I don't know, Teilhard de Chardin might have said it's the noosphere that's coming, or a Bucky Fuller or a Marshall McLuhan would have had an absolute ball understanding the implications of the internet. But who are some of our visionaries that understand these cybernetic developments? George Gilder's going to be here,
George Gilder, his
and
new
also,
book, I'm sure
yeah.
you're very excited, because he has recognized that, well, he really actually picks up another thread that I think I first heard enunciated by Stuart Brand,
Yeah.
who said that we're going to spend the next 100 years just working out things to do with limitless bandwidth.
Yes, all right.
And Gilder talks about the fact that we are now thresholding toward essentially infinite bandwidth.
Yeah.
And all forms of communication, all forms of telemetry, the telephone, the radio, the television, even movies, finally will be distributed through the internet. The internet subsumes all other communication systems.
Yeah, it's an incredible thing. It's an incredible thing. Have you looked at Kurzweil's book, The Age of Spiritual Machines, and what do you think about his take?
No, but I saw him on.
Yeah, you're right about that. Brian Lamb is something else. I mean, he really is. He put together that thing. But you think that the internet or the television that C-SPAN is likely to go into the internet? And
Well,
the internet
I think everything will go into the internet, and it really does mark. It's not simply a sort of an evolutionary step. It really is a jump. I think it's a real shift in the whole species.
Quantum paradigm shift?
Yeah,
Yes, that's
yeah,
the thing
yeah.
that actually is going on.
Yeah, we're becoming mutants. It's a new movement, and I think essentially the species is going to rediscover itself anew. Yes. Yes, I think it's going to be a test. It's going to be a strain. It's been a great challenge. I don't think everything will be smooth and everything will be good. Many of the strains and tensions created by this very rapid change are evident, I think, in many of the conferences here. There is a real deep fret about what are we going to do, because it stretches and strains the fabric of tradition and life and existence, and many of us are going to have to those who survive will be those who most quickly sort of shed the traditions that have held them back in many ways. But then again, if I started with this quote from Stuart Brand, let me end with another one.
Why not?
He said, when a big change comes along, you're either part of the steamroller or you're part of the road.
Ted Turner said, lead, follower, get out of the way.
Yeah, which I will challenge, I think, is a mistake, because it doesn't leave room for the critic.
Oh, I see.
And at any given time in the great evolution of history, a lot of people say, well, it's just the great leader. No, it's the great leader and the great critic.
Yeah, the critic.
Yes.
Well, one last one, Alfred North Whitehead.
All right.
Alfred North Whitehead was known to say, the major advances in civilizations are processes that all but wreck the culture in which they occur.
Right.
That might be characteristic.
I think that is certainly true of the internet.
Anyway, yeah.
So to paraphrase Shakespeare, that which is past is but prologue. You ain't seen nothing yet.
You ain't seen nothing yet.
Yeah.
Shakespeare said it first.
Yes.
Okay, Kevin,
Thank you.
Good to see you again.
Thank you.
Your pleasure.
Bye.
Kevin Saunders, a major journalistic following of science and of the new developments, so forth. We're here at the World Forum Conference, I guess it's called, during early September of the year 2000. Stay tuned. We'll be coming back with more. And again, Kevin, thank you really very much indeed.
Thanks, Harold.
Coming right back. Welcome to this segment of the program. We're pleased to welcome to the program Larry Gell, Dr. Larry Gell, and he's the Director General of the International Agency for Economic Development. Wide experience in terms of the business world on a global strategic thinking level, and has been involved with the UN for a very long time in terms of particularly archiving or videotaping events over there. And Larry, welcome very much to Conversations to close this program out.
Thank you very much. It's nice to be here, Harold. And this is such an important meeting, the World Forum.
Yeah.
Very, very important.
Well, the thing I wanted to talk, because one of the things that came out, we've talked with a number of people here and so forth, and one of the things, we had many people, we had a wide spectrum of people represented, from government to business to environmentalists to ecology-minded people to indigenous American Indian people. There's all kinds of representation of people here at the forum. But one thing that came out consistently from everyone, it seems to me, is that the concerns that are, since this is tied into the UN Millennium Summit, is the United Nations, one of the concerns is there's a great deal going on of intellectual relevance and spiritual relevance in terms of the planet and so forth. But one of the things that came out particularly is that the ideas and we've had these major conferences the UN has held and so forth, but one of the things that is really needed is the communicating of some of the events and the ideas that are there to a broader audience, and you've been very involved in that. I mean, with your UN videotaping and so forth. And we want to get to that, but I wonder maybe you could share a little of your own personal background and so forth, and how you came to be at the UN, and then we can talk about communicating ideas that are relevant to the UN function.
Well, to start off with, if you think about it, I've had 30 years prior to 1990 working with the global corporations, the multinationals, and all over the world. It's global. It's funny to me, because now I've been almost exclusively at the United Nations, where I've just discovered that the people at the United Nations, the countries, and these organizations that are here at the World Forum have just discovered globalization. Now they're all beginning to focus on globalization, and they're beginning to say, hey, there's a lot of problems out here in the world, and we need now open and transparency with the World Trade Organization and with the United Nations. And if you think about the United Nations, it has been for 55 years a totally closed operation where ABC, NBC, and nobody else, even CNN, was not allowed to videotape meetings and what goes on in the United Nations.
Yeah, they only stood by that escalator and asked ambassadors to come over for a couple of sound bites or something, and that's been the coverage of the UN. I mean, it's wholly inadequate in a certain sense in terms of the value of what's going on, and particularly also against the fact that it's getting easier and easier to archive intelligently, intellectually important material and considerations that are going on there at the UN.
And if you think about that process of closing it down for that long period of time, if you look at the number, especially in relationship to the number one criticism of the United Nations. The number one criticism of the United Nations, like this forum, is it's a bunch of good people who come together, they mean well, and they just discuss topics and they never implement anything. And then next year they discuss the topic again. So
that is important, that there be a forum where the topics can come out and they can do it, but that is an important function in and of itself.
But see, that was a criticism of the United Nations, and therefore they said, well, it's not necessary to put the information out because they don't do anything with it anyways, they just discuss it. On the other hand, that criticism, in my opinion, is the number one strength of the United Nations, that these people at the World Forum are absolutely correct. What has happened is, on the one hand, globalization has been going off in this direction, and doing just fine. It's been working wonderful for the corporations. They've been globalizing, getting larger. Stocks have been going up. Wealth has been accumulated and so forth.
For the corporations.
For the corporations, causing a tremendous gap between the middle class and the poor. Separation. That's caused religious groups and groups like this World Forum to come together and to bring people from all different backgrounds. Ambassadors and NGOs and Nobel laureates and heads of governments. To come in and start complaining about it. So what's happening is, while the corporations have been going off in this way, globalizing, now building are these people's organizations that are beginning to address, and it's a collection of all civil society that are beginning to address these issues. And so they're beginning to look at institutions like the World Trade Organization and the United Nations and say, hey, we should know what's going on in there because you guys are analyzing the world's problems. You should share that with us outside.
Yeah, before you were an international consultant in terms of the world business leadership and that sort of the globalization, you were also involved with Strategic Air Command. So and they used to have a thing that said, war is too important to be left only to the generals. In a certain sense, you might say globalization is too important to be left only to the corporations in a way. And these other kind of people, and that's a big issue because a lot of people feel that it's very good for the corporations, but there are questions of pollution standards, labor laws, human rights, and so forth, that ought to be brought into the consideration, and the forum does bring some of that in a way, and does also the UN take those things, human rights and so forth, adequately, or able to take that adequately into account?
But look at me. I was the only person ever in the history of the United Nations for about 6 years under Boutros Ghali and Samir Sandbar, who ran the Department of Public Information, said, we need to share this information with the non-governmental organizations, with the universities, with the ambassadors, and with the countries.
With the people.
Yes. So he approved me to videotape inside the UN, and I taped for 6 years.
That's amazing.
And
You went with this new technology, and now it's becoming digital. It's getting very, very better quality, and you were able to go and videotape in a very cost-effective kind of way these things that were going on, and archive that and make that available to the NGOs and through them to the world.
Yeah, and to the ambassadors and the government.
That's a very open idea or transparent policy in terms of utilizing the new technology.
It certainly is.
Yeah.
The new
Congratulations on that work, incidentally. Yeah.
But on the other hand, just last year in July, the new head of the United Nations, Kofi Annan, and his Department of Public Information, which is run by Mr. Hogan from Japan, has basically fundamentally closed that down and said, no, we're not going to do that anymore.
Now, why?
We've never really been able to find out why. They said there was a letter written, what was it's a long story, but you know, we never really have been able to find out why that's been closed down. I've approached the U.S. mission about it, and they seem to just look the other way. The whole place becomes opaque. So on the one hand, they're sitting over there saying we want to be open and transparent. On the other hand, they're actually closing it down.
Well, is it that they want to close it down? They want it to be transparent, but they want it to be transparent in a way that they can, in a certain sense, understand, and that it's not being misrepresented by somebody who's not being responsible, like you. Would they take that at your level, or is it at a policy level that they just want the place to be closed down? They don't want the information going on. What do you think? Is it directed at you? Or is it directed
I don't know if
the
it's
broader principle that the UN should be closed to the scrutiny of the world population?
Yeah, I think it's that, you have to realize for 55 years here at the United Nations, they've never allowed that out.
Yeah.
Must be a reason for it.
Yeah.
Now I come along and I'm allowed to do that, and they also allowed me to put it on the air on the television show.
It's an important question to ask. They haven't allowed it to go out. They didn't allow it to go out. We don't have yet a C-SPAN of the United Nations. As important as it is, there should be a thing like the C-SPAN concentrating on the United Nations. It hasn't happened yet. They haven't allowed it to go out. Was that a matter of policy? They wanted it closed? Or was it a matter of there just wasn't the right combination? Or was it there wasn't funding in the terms of very bureaucratic, organized, very expensive ways to record things and everything, that they just couldn't get it together in terms of budgetary terms? What was the reason they didn't, and why did they allow you to do it?
Yeah.
I mean, you're an innovative individual who's able to take advantage, move, with alacrity and that sort of thing.
Get things done.
It's an important question of why you were allowed to be put in this position of archiving thousands of hours of important activity that's going on at the UN in an up-to-date media format.
Yeah. I think the answer to the first question of why it wasn't allowed is it's an absolute foreign policy, probably of the U.S. government, not to allow, or definitely of the United Nations, which is basically controlled, as we know, by the U.S. government. So it was probably a deliberate closing down of the information that's going on inside the UN.
Why?
Part of the policy that they don't want that information. We used to say.
Why does what is the rationale of the policy?
Well, I can answer that from the military, but it's a concept that the military uses, which is need-to-know basis. They don't really need to know that's going on.
The folks.
Here. Yes,
the people.
Right.
Okay.
Therefore, it stays within the walls of the United Nations.
Well, that would happen with any institution that does not want transparency. They don't particularly want it. They don't let a corporation wouldn't want people to know necessarily what they're doing and just buy the products and so on, do what you're told.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, and so therefore they said no to that. But Boutros Ghali's philosophy was exactly what this whole World Forum is all about, saying, hey, what is the single strength of the United Nations? The single strength of the United Nations is that they can address a world problem better than the U.S. government, better than any government of the world, and better than any institution of the world, because they can bring 189 countries in, and they can focus the ambassadors and the ministers that are focused on that particular issue. They can bring in Nobel laureates and world's experts. They can bring in the universities and the private sector, and they can delineate that problem and identify it. So Boutros Ghali's philosophy was, if the U.S. is basically not going to pay its bill over here, we don't have any money for development worldwide. We need
the United States isn't paying their dues.
No, absolutely not. They haven't paid for years, which is a big mistake.
So the UN is on its knees looking for money to function.
Yeah, so basically that's what they said. It said it had to go in that direction. So, pardon me, if you think about that, that's basically a closing of it. It was closed for 55 years, or actually minus the 6. And then Boutros opened it up for 6. And then Kofi comes along in his administration, now it's closed back down again.
Well,
It's just a non-sharing of the information, which is exactly what the World Forum says it needs to be open.
We have Mr. Littlejohn's, we have the World Chronicle, we have the UNDP itself. Its task is to communicate. Why haven't they been able to do that? Is it they've not been able to is it just a matter of inefficiency, or do you think it's a matter of
I don't want to use the word nefarious or something of that sort. They want to cover up and not know what's going on there because it's, they have a saying about how don't ever let anybody see how you make sausage or something, that kind of thing in government.
Give away our secrets.
It's an important question because there should be an opening upon the UN because it's the only institutional world institution that has institutions in place on a world scale. It shouldn't be allowed in the, just by inertia or something to go the way of the League or not inertia, but of, neglect to go the way of the League or something like it and be, put out of function. It's important that people would know about this. And what you've been doing is on the van of that, and that's why it's particularly important because that's the thing that keeps coming up at this forum is we have to communicate to people, and here you were doing it, and why aren't they doing it, what steps are being taken, in your view, for them that they're going to meet this transparency need and get information out in a reasonable format to the world population in a responsible way, do you think?
Yeah, well, I think the only way to do it is like there's a major religious movement at the United Nations too that's saying that they need that kind of transparency and openness. And then forums like this World Forum is extremely important to get. You have to organize groups worldwide, put pressure on them to start opening that back up and allow that information out. Because I don't know how you can solve the problems of the world if you don't know what the details of it are. You don't know what the causes are. You don't know the information. How can you work on the solutions? It's very important.
We've had all these conferences, the major Cairo, Beijing, and so forth. They had all those, delineating the issues have been pretty well done by these major conferences the UN has organized over this last decade and so forth. We understand the issues pretty well. And
yeah, we know what they are.
We do.
We know what the problems are.
We do know what the problems are. Do we know the solutions? Is it, people often, if you have a thing where you don't want transparency, it's because there's a problem that you don't have a solution to. Is it because there isn't a comprehensive solution to the problems that are being confronted that they take this attitude, in your view?
My opinion is pure out that if you look at the non-governmental organizations in the United Nations, for 50 years or so, the U.S. government totally supported them and even encouraged them to do these global 8 conferences that delineated the world's problems. And they used to like the non-governmental organizations because they could use all that bad information to focus against, quote, the evil empires. But when Russia and China suddenly became our business partners, and there's no evil empires out there, then all these non-governmental organizations that have been focused on all these issues around the world, including all of the countries, turned and looked at us, superpower, I feel sorry for America, turned and looked at us as a superpower with their hand out and said, okay, we know what the problems are, we know how to solve them, it's going to cost money, what are you going to do about it?
That's the problem.
And the U.S. says, oh my God, we created a monster because we just got this guy Gingrich in Washington with his contract with America to convince everybody that we should get rid of entitlement, no handouts, go get yourself a job,
So
and we dump people.
Yeah.
So this is a major problem that's come back in on the U.S. right now, and I think that's part of it, and so close it down.
Well, okay, look, we're one problem, we're running out of time. Larry, thanks very much. Larry Gell, and we're here, he's speaking, he's had a long, really on-the-spot ability to videotape and get information out about the United Nations. Happy to have been able to present that perception. Sorry we run out of time. Good that we've been able to, happy we've been able to bring you some of the perceptions and challenges at the World Forum. Generally a good idea, the World Forum, don't you agree?
Absolutely essential.
Okay, good. Okay, we invite you to tune in. We'll be coming back again next week. That's it for this particular segment. Once again, Larry, thanks a lot for everything, and we look forward to coming into your homes again next week. So please tune in.